Angelina was a strikingly beautiful woman. Never imagined she would end up trapped in a life of luxury that felt like a cage. After graduating from university, her family pressured her into marrying James Carter, a wealthy businessman 25 years her senior. At 52, James saw Angelina as the perfect trophy wife, while Angelina saw the marriage as a means to lift her family out of poverty. Though grateful for the security and comfort James provided, she struggled with deep feelings of dissatisfaction, as their vastly different personalities and interests left her feeling isolated and unfulfilled. As the years went by, Angelina and James's marriage settled into a predictable routine. Their lives were filled with wealth and comfort, but the emotional distance between them only grew wider. Despite the luxurious lifestyle, Angelina always felt a hollow void inside, a yearning for something more than what her marriage offered. James, focused on his business ventures and indifferent to her emotional needs, left Angelina feeling increasingly isolated. Their only child, Madison, was the bright spot in Angelina's otherwise lonely life. As Madison grew into a young woman, she became everything Angelina had once aspired to be: vibrant, ambitious, and full of life. Madison's presence gave Angelina a sense of purpose, even as her marriage with James remained cold and distant. When Madison entered university, fate introduced her to Jason, a strikingly handsome and charismatic man 10 years older than her. Jason was confident, successful, and had a magnetic charm that drew people to him. From the moment they met, Madison was captivated. She found in Jason the perfect blend of maturity and excitement that she had always longed for in a partner. Their romance blossomed quickly, and Jason became a constant fixture in the family's life. He was the kind of man who could easily win over anyone with his sharp wit and easy smile, and Madison was head over heels in love. For Angelina, watching her daughter's love story unfold was bittersweet. She couldn't help but feel envious of the passion and connection Madison shared with Jason, something she had never experienced in her own marriage to James. Over time, as Madison and Jason's relationship deepened, Angelina found herself drawn to Jason's charm in ways she hadn't anticipated. He was attentive, kind, and made her feel seen in a way James never had. Though Angelina tried to bury these feelings, they lingered in the background, threatening to surface at any moment. Eventually, Madison and Jason married in a lavish ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Madison was glowing with happiness, convinced she had found the man of her dreams. As Angelina watched her daughter take her vows, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling gnawing at her, an odd combination of pride, envy, and something far more dangerous. However, beneath the polished surface of family gatherings and shared laughter, a dangerous attraction simmered just out of sight. Jason, though deeply committed to Madison, couldn't ignore the growing tension he felt whenever Angelina was near. There was something magnetic about her, something different from the youthful vibrance of Madison. Angelina carried herself with a grace and quiet confidence that Jason found increasingly hard to resist. Her beauty, though more mature, had a sophistication that stirred something primal in him, something forbidden. At first, the attraction was subtle, hidden beneath the pretense of family affection. Jason would steal glances at Angelina when he thought no one was looking, watching the way the sunlight reflected off her golden hair or how her smile, though faint, held a depth that Madison's youthful exuberance couldn't quite capture. Angelina, in turn, felt a shift in Jason's behavior. His gaze lingered on her longer than it should, his compliments felt more intimate, and soon she couldn't deny the growing spark between them. She tried to push the thought away, reminding herself that Jason was her daughter's husband, but that only seemed to heighten the allure of what was clearly forbidden. For Angelina, Jason's attention was intoxicating. After years of feeling invisible in her marriage to James, who was far more preoccupied with his businesses than with her, the way Jason looked at her awakened something long dormant. It wasn't just the physical attraction. It was the way Jason made her feel alive, seen, and desired in a way James never had. Each time their eyes met across the dinner table or in passing at family events, a surge of heat ran through her, pulling her deeper into the dangerous dance they were beginning to engage in. What started as harmless conversations, simple chats about life, work, and family, slowly evolved into something more. Their talks became more frequent, more personal, and more charged with unspoken desire. Angelina found herself confiding in Jason about her dissatisfaction with James, her longing for something more meaningful, more passionate. Jason, in turn, listened with a kind of attentiveness that felt both thrilling and dangerous. There was no explicit confession of feelings at first, but in the space between their words, the chemistry between them grew undeniable. Soon, those innocent conversations were accompanied by secret, lingering glances. At first, it was subtle, Jason's hand brushing against hers as he passed her a glass of wine, or Angelina standing a little too close when they found themselves alone in the kitchen. But as time passed, the tension escalated. Each stolen glance became a moment pregnant with possibility, each touch sending a jolt of electricity through them both. One evening, when Madison was away for a work trip and James was, as usual, absorbed in his business calls, Jason and Angelina found themselves alone in the quiet of the family's lavish living room. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Jason's eyes, dark with desire, locked onto Angelina's, and for a moment time seemed to stop. The space between them felt too small, too intimate, and before either of them realized it, they had crossed a line. Jason reached out, his fingers brushing against the bare skin of Angelina's arm. A touch so light it could have been accidental, but the spark it ignited was unmistakable. Angelina froze, her breath catching in her throat as the intensity of the moment overwhelmed her. What followed was a series of stolen moments, each one riskier than the last. Jason and Angelina, unable to resist the gravitational pull between them, found themselves drawn together in ways they knew were wrong but couldn't stop. Late-night whispers, stolen touches in the shadows, and fleeting moments of intimacy filled the growing void in both their lives. The more they indulged in their secret desires, the more dangerous their affair became. Each encounter leaving them more intoxicated by the thrill of what they were risking: betrayal, heartbreak, and the collapse of the very family they claimed to care about. And yet, despite the guilt that gnawed at Angelina whenever she looked at her daughter, she couldn't stop. Jason had become her escape from the sterile, loveless life she had led with James, a reprieve from the years of neglect and emotional distance. For Jason, Angelina was the embodiment of everything he craved but couldn't find in Madison's youthful innocence: a maturity, a complexity, a depth that both frightened and excited him. They were spiraling toward a point of no return, their secret now a fire too wild to contain. Jason, too, found himself torn in a whirlwind of emotions. At one time, his love for Madison had been sincere, a love that grew from admiration and respect. But as his forbidden relationship with Angelina deepened, that love began to fade, overshadowed by the magnetic, dangerous passion he felt for her. He tried to convince himself at first that it was merely a fleeting attraction, something to be dismissed, a momentary distraction from the predictability of married life. But the more time he spent with Angelina, the less fleeting those feelings became. What began as a simple, curious attraction soon ignited into an uncontrollable obsession. Jason couldn't stop thinking about her. The touch of her skin, the electricity between them when they were alone, the way her presence made his pulse race like Madison's never had. Each time he met Angelina, Jason felt something that was beyond anything he had experienced with Madison. Angelina made him feel alive, reckless and daring, as if the very danger of their affair was what gave it its intensity. The excitement was intoxicating, and despite knowing the disastrous consequences that could follow, Jason found himself unable to resist. Every rational part of him knew he was not only betraying his wife, but also threatening the very foundation of their family. But the pull of Angelina was too strong, and no amount of guilt or reasoning could make him stop. Their stolen moments of intimacy had started innocently enough: a touch on the arm that lingered too long, a conversation that became too personal. But once the line had been crossed, there was no going back. Jason began to crave every encounter with Angelina more than he had ever craved anything before. The way she looked at him, the glances filled with unspoken longing, the brief yet electrifying touches that sent a surge of adrenaline through his body. With every secret meeting, his obsession with her grew deeper, until it consumed his every thought. Angelina, for her part, became the center of his world. Her beauty, her vulnerability, and her loneliness in her own marriage only heightened his desire for her. He convinced himself that what they shared was more than just lust, that it was a connection far deeper than anything he had ever felt for Madison. And so, as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, their affair became more than just a series of stolen moments. It became a secret life that they both couldn't live without. Their secret meetings, which had once been sporadic and filled with hesitation, soon became a regular, fevered ritual. Every glance across the dinner table, every whispered word, was filled with the tension of their hidden desire. What had started as fleeting moments of passion, sneaking away in the dead of night or sharing heated, stolen kisses, escalated into an affair that consumed their lives. They became experts at deception, hiding their growing passion behind a web of lies and deceit. Jason would invent excuses, staying late at work, running unnecessary errands, anything that would give him more time with Angelina. She, in turn, would tell James she was meeting old friends, attending social events, or visiting family. In reality, they would escape to hidden places, their hearts racing with the thrill of doing something forbidden. The rush of sneaking around, of being dangerously close to being caught, only heightened the intensity of their passion. It made their connection feel even more thrilling, more dangerous, and they reveled in it. They met in secluded hotels, where the outside world ceased to exist. The hours they spent together felt like a dream, charged with an energy that neither of them could find anywhere else. They would whisper promises to each other, secret oaths that bound them in this dangerous game. Angelina would lose herself in Jason's embrace, her mind pushing aside the guilt for the fleeting ecstasy of their stolen hours. Jason, too, found in Angelina a kind of release he had never known. He was no longer the dutiful husband or the responsible man. He was a man consumed by passion, driven by a desire that seemed to override all reason. But the deeper they fell into their affair, the more they had to lie. Angelina, who had always prided herself on being honest, now found herself weaving an intricate web of deceit. She lied to Madison, hiding the most devastating betrayal a mother could commit, and she lied to James, the husband who had trusted her for years. She became adept at covering her tracks, at acting normal even when her heart was racing with the thrill of her affair. Yet with every lie, the guilt gnawed at her, even as she told herself she couldn't stop. Jason, too, became skilled at living this double life. He would kiss Madison goodnight, all the while imagining the next time he could slip away to be with Angelina. The lies, the deceit, the risk of being discovered only seemed to make the affair more intoxicating. The fear of being caught heightened the intensity of their passion, as if every moment spent together could be their last. It was this fear that drove them, pushing them to seek out more secret moments, more stolen hours, as though they were racing against time before their world would inevitably collapse. Yet beneath the passion, both Jason and Angelina knew they were playing a dangerous game. They were living on borrowed time, aware that their secrets could unravel at any moment, destroying not just their marriages but the lives of everyone around them. But the thrill, the danger, and the sheer intensity of their connection made it impossible to walk away. They were trapped in a web of their own making, and as their lies multiplied, they knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The question lingered in the back of their minds: how long could they keep this up before it all unraveled? How long before their deceit tore their family apart, leaving behind only the wreckage of what they had once known? One night, as they lay together in a hotel room far from the eyes of the family, Jason confessed his feelings for Angelina. He told her he had never loved anyone the way he loved her, not even Madison. Angelina, overwhelmed with guilt and desire, knew this had gone too far, but she was trapped. She was in too deep. They both were. Meanwhile, James began to sense that something was deeply wrong with Angelina. The woman who once shared her thoughts and dreams with him had become distant, cold, and withdrawn. She was no longer the affectionate partner he had known. Angelina often disappeared from the house without a word, making excuses that seemed increasingly flimsy, and her late-night outings left James restless with suspicion. At first, he tried to brush off the nagging doubts, convincing himself that perhaps it was just the strain of their marriage. But the changes in her behavior were too glaring to ignore. Angelina became secretive, guarding her phone like it held her deepest secrets, slipping away for whispered conversations and returning with a strained expression. When James tried to question her, she brushed him off, growing defensive and evasive. The distance between them widened, and James found himself lying awake at night, consumed by the gnawing fear that something was terribly wrong. At the same time, Madison, too, began to notice changes in her husband, Jason. The late nights at work, the unexplained absences, and the cryptic phone calls had become more frequent. He was distracted, often checking his phone as if waiting for something or someone. Madison's heart began to ache with worry. She had once felt so secure in her love for Jason, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that he was slipping away from her. Yet, despite her unease, she never could have imagined the depth of his betrayal. The possibility that her mother could be involved never even crossed her mind. James, driven by the growing suspicion and the coldness in his marriage, decided to investigate. He could no longer ignore the unease gnawing at him. Late one night, when Angelina was in the shower, he seized the opportunity to check her phone. His hands trembled as he scrolled through her messages, heart pounding with the fear of what he might find. And then there it was. A series of explicit texts exchanged between Angelina and Jason. The words were like knives cutting into him with each line. The text revealed a passionate, illicit affair, one filled with desire, longing, and betrayal. But the most horrifying realization wasn't just that his wife was unfaithful, it was that the man she was seeing was their son-in-law, Jason. James's world shattered in that instant. His blood ran cold, disbelief flooding through him. His wife, the woman he had spent years with, the mother of his only daughter, had been carrying on an affair with the man who was married to their daughter. It was a betrayal so twisted, so unimaginable, that for a moment James couldn't even process it. The reality hit him like a tidal wave of anger, disgust, and heartbreak. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the fury building inside him as the full weight of what had happened came crashing down.
If you like charming stories that touch the heart and inspire the mind, be sure to press the subscribe button and activate the bell to receive more wonderful tales.
The next morning, James couldn't hold back any longer. He confronted Angelina, his voice shaking with rage and pain. He demanded to know the truth, his eyes blazing with fury as he asked her how long it had been going on. Angelina, realizing she had been caught, tried to deny it at first, but the truth was written all over her face. Cornered with nowhere to hide, she broke down in tears. She confessed everything: the stolen glances, the secret meetings, the passionate affair that had consumed her and Jason. Her words tumbled out in a rush, filled with guilt, shame, and remorse, but it was too late for apologies. James stood there, seething with anger, barely able to control the overwhelming emotions tearing him apart. He had been betrayed in the worst possible way, by his wife and his own son-in-law. Every word from Angelina felt like another dagger to his heart. The woman he had once loved and trusted had destroyed everything they had built together, and the thought of Jason, his daughter's husband, being a part of this sick betrayal made his stomach turn. "You've destroyed this family," James spat, his voice trembling with disgust. "How could you do this to Madison? To me? To all of us?" Angelina sobbed, pleading for forgiveness, but James's heart was too filled with rage to listen. He couldn't look at her without feeling sick. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. There was no repairing what had been broken. "It's over," James said coldly, his voice like ice. "Our marriage is over. You will face the consequences of your actions. But this doesn't end here." Angelina stared at him, horrified, as the meaning of his words began to sink in. James had made up his mind. Madison deserved to know the truth. She had the right to understand who her husband really was and the depth of his deceit. It wasn't just about his own pain anymore. It was about protecting his daughter from the web of lies that had entangled her life. Without another word, James stormed out, leaving Angelina alone in her devastation. He had to tell Madison the truth, no matter how much it would break her heart. She needed to know that the man she had trusted, the man she had built a life with, had betrayed her in the most unforgivable way. And that betrayal was not just with any other woman, it was with her own mother. The thought of that conversation, of watching the pain and disbelief flood Madison's face, filled James with dread, but he knew it was the only way forward. He couldn't allow this secret to remain buried, festering in the dark, while their family tore itself apart in silence. He had to tear off the mask, no matter how painful it would be. The confrontation was inevitable. James could no longer hold back the storm brewing inside him. With a cold, detached voice that barely concealed his rage, he called Madison and told her she needed to come to the house immediately. His words were cryptic but heavy with a sense of finality. Madison felt a chill run down her spine, sensing that something was terribly wrong. The tone of her father's voice was enough to send her heart racing with fear, but nothing could have prepared her for the devastation that awaited her. When Madison arrived, she stepped into a house that no longer felt like home. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the faint sound of her mother's sobs. She walked into the living room and was greeted by the sight of her father, pale, rigid, and standing with his arms crossed, and her mother, Angelina, sitting on the edge of the couch, her face buried in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. The image alone was enough to send Madison into a state of panic. Confused and terrified, she looked between them, searching for answers. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling as her eyes flicked from her father's cold, unyielding expression to her mother's broken sobs. "Why is Mom crying? What happened?" James turned to face her, his eyes hollow, the anger in his chest barely contained. With a single breath, he delivered the words that would forever shatter Madison's world. "Jason has been having an affair with your mother. It's been going on for months. He's been lying to you, to all of us." For a moment, Madison simply stared at her father, her mind unable to grasp the magnitude of what she had just heard. The room spun, her knees buckling beneath her as the words echoed in her ears. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. No, that's not possible," Madison whispered, her voice faint, disbelieving. "Jason wouldn't. Not with her." Her gaze turned to her mother, who sat hunched over, racked with sobs, unable to even look her daughter in the eyes. The truth was there, in her mother's tears, in her father's rage, in the hollow feeling growing inside her chest. "How could you?" Madison's voice cracked, her disbelief giving way to fury. "How could either of you do this to me?" Her voice rose in pitch, a scream filled with pain and anger as she directed her rage toward Angelina, the woman she had trusted and loved all her life. "You're my mother," she shouted, tears flooding her eyes. "How could you do this to your own daughter? To me?" Her chest heaved with the weight of her betrayal, her words spilling out in an uncontrollable torrent of anguish. "You knew what Jason meant to me. You knew how much I loved him, how much I trusted him. And you were supposed to protect me, not be the one who destroys everything." Angelina wept harder, her guilt consuming her as she struggled to find the words to explain the inexcusable. She had no defense, no excuses that could make sense of the unimaginable betrayal she had committed. Her tears were her only response, but they offered no comfort to the daughter she had shattered. Madison's fury grew as her heart cracked under the weight of the truth. She felt betrayed not only by Jason but by the very person who had given her life. "You ruined everything. You ruined my marriage, my trust, my family," she screamed, her voice breaking as her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I can't even look at you." James stood silently, his own fury simmering beneath the surface as he watched the confrontation unfold. His heart broke for his daughter, but his rage toward Angelina was just as fierce. He had hoped, in some small way, that there might be something left to salvage between them, but the scene before him left no doubt. This was the end. The room was filled with Madison's raw, unfiltered emotions, but beneath her anger was a deep, aching pain. She had always suspected something was wrong with Jason, his late nights, his distant behavior, but never in her darkest nightmares had she imagined the other woman would be her own mother. The realization twisted inside her like a knife. "How long?" Madison demanded, her voice quieter now but still shaking with fury. "How long has this been going on?" Angelina choked on her sobs, unable to respond. It was James who answered, his voice cold and hard. "Months. This has been going on for months behind your back." Madison staggered back, her body trembling. She felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. "Months?" she repeated, her voice weak, as if the word itself were poison. "Months of lies." "Yes," James said flatly. "And it ends today." Madison collapsed onto the nearest chair, her head in her hands as the weight of it all came crashing down. Her life, her marriage, her trust, it was all a lie. And the people she had loved the most had been the ones to destroy it. But James wasn't done. His fury wasn't just directed at Angelina. It extended to Jason, the man who had betrayed not only his wife but the entire family. "Jason's a coward," James growled. "He fled as soon as he realized the truth was coming out. He didn't even have the decency to face what he's done." Madison's heart broke anew. The man she thought she knew, the man she had married, had betrayed her in the worst way possible, and now he had run, leaving her to pick up the pieces. Finally, James turned his attention back to Angelina. His voice was calm, but there was a deadly finality to it. "This marriage is over," he said coldly. "You and I are done. I'm selling the villa. Madison and I will be leaving, and you can stay here and face the consequences of your actions." James made the decision to protect his family from a scandal that could destroy their reputation. As the owner of a major company, he feared the affair would reach the media, damaging both his business and his daughter Madison. His priority was to shield her from the shame and fallout, and the only way to do that was to leave Angelina and the life they once knew behind. Angelina looked up at him, her face pale and tear-streaked. She knew there was no redemption for her now, no way to undo the damage she had caused. Her family was gone, torn apart by her own betrayal. James looked at Madison, his heart breaking for the pain she was in. "I'll take care of you," he whispered to her. "We'll leave all of this behind. We don't need her. Or him." And with that, James took Madison's hand, leading her out of the house that had once been their home, but was now filled only with the wreckage of broken trust and shattered lives. They left Angelina behind in a world of her own making, a world built on lies, deceit, and betrayal, a world that had finally come crashing down. The luxurious villa, once filled with love and laughter, now stood empty just like her life. James and Madison moved far away, starting fresh in a new place, far from the shadows of the past. As they stood together in their new home, father and daughter, they vowed never to let deceit and betrayal break their bond. James looked at Madison with love and pride, and together, they began the long journey of healing from the wounds left by the ones who had wronged them.